Advancing Employment, Georgia's Training and Technical Assistance Center. I am joined, as always, by my team members there at Advancing Employment. Joseph Harrison and Dr. Tracy Rackensberger are with us as well. Special for me to introduce Steve Hall, Dr. Steve Hall and Patty Cassidy from Griffin-Hammis. And I'm excited to learn from them today. So I'll turn it over to you two.
All right. Thank you so much, Doug. So what we're going to talk about today, so what is fidelity? So all fidelity is that it's saying that whatever you're doing on behalf of helping someone, that it has some proof, it has some research, it has some real data behind it, that it has relevance to promised outcomes. In other words, what we were doing before, there's many great leaders, a lot of smart people have great ideas about how we should go about doing this customized employment. Obviously, Michael Callahan and Kerry Griffin in particular have really obviously it's their baby. They've done all the work that was necessary to make this a part of American life. That is customized employment. What this is saying is that what we're going to do is gather all. When we say that it looks like this might be the thing to do, well, who says besides these great leaders? What else? What does the data say? Well, the data says, one, rest assured, they were right. So there's no question about that. So anyway, that's what fidelity is. It says you have some proof or research behind evidence behind what you're doing. Scale. The fidelity scale says this, is that in going about doing things that are good for people, when you again ask experts, they will tell you right up, there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. And if you do it how I best suggest you do it, then of course it's going to turn out really great. But what a fidelity scale says that, well, there's degrees of correctness. It's saying that there's other things to think about. And this particular scale even has a -1. It even says what not to do. So in all these tenets, there's minuses. So not only does it say what to do, but it says what not to do. So it's based right on what Piaget's original thinking was. When a child is learning what a dog is or a cat, honey, a doggy. No, honey, that's a cat. That's a kitty. That's a cat. What it means is that even all of us, all through childhood and all through adulthood, how we learn is not just learning what something is, but also learning what something isn't. And this scale does include a tenet with that. And in fidelity thinking, it's just saying that you're going to have evidence-based, data-based determinations of actions taken that you're going to implement to practice. 4 of the last 7 Nobel Prizes in economics have been about fidelity thinking. It has been something called behavioral economics, which says that we need to slow down. These are Nobel Prize winners. Slow down, because what we're doing is we're using rules of thumb. We're making decisions, things that we think are right based on whatever our experiences are. And we believe that must still be the truth or is the truth. And what it's saying is we need to check the evidence. What does the evidence say about that? So that is what fidelity thinking is. It's saying before we have a tendency to think very fast and give quick answers for things. So the fidelity thinking is that. The discovery fidelity scale. So it's discovery fidelity scale because it's the first process in customized employment. It's how customized employment begins. It sets the entire background, the foundation, the framing, all the evidence, everything for what happens after that. And so the discovery is obviously, extremely important. The big deal about it, of course, it's not an assessment and it's not an evaluation. It's a determination. It's getting to know who is this person. The Job Development Fidelity Scale, it came about afterwards because we found this, that when people do everything great, they do discovery well, if what happens in customized employment after discovery, if what happens after is traditional job development or customary job development and not customized job development, then the results aren't there. In other words, because of evidence. In other words, you need to have a completely different approach, and we'll talk more about this, to job development. You can't go job finding. It's not about saying, hey, who out there is hiring and who might have openings, and hey, who are the people that will hire people with disabilities? No, that's job finding. Customized employment, customized job development's very different. And then the last thing, same thing. Consultative employment training and fidelity scale, do discovery right. Evidence-based. Do it with fidelity to best practices. Do customized job development with fidelity best practices. Sure enough, after hire, if you go with a supported employment job coach model, that, oh, well, then we're going to, this is kind of going to be like, after hire, it's going to be like supported employment then. No, it's not. It's not at all like supported employment. So it's very different. And, you know, the big thing is who's doing that training. And of course, that who's doing the training is a coworker, a supervisor, someone just like how, you know, in our lives, all of us, that we had someone else that that believed in us and wanted to help us do well with our work. So that's the big differences there. And Patty, is there anything else I need to say or miss anything?
No, I was just going to say that I think the first three bullets on this slide about what is fidelity, fidelity scale, and fidelity thinking is all about the thinking processes of fidelity to best practices. And I think the last three items on this list, which are the scales, are really more about the actions, the purposeful actions that we take. So as we go through this today, you'll get more detail about all of this. Just to clarify that, you know, that we only have 90 minutes for the whole thing. So we're not going to get into a lot of great detail through all of this, but really want to make sure that we're covering these 6 items. So Steve, I think you've got the next slide, which is just really to help us understand the purpose of the fidelity scales.
Well, there's only, you know, really the purpose is this. If you could look at the fidelity scales as if you think of maybe an entire body being customized employment, all the fidelity scales are what would be termed the essential tenets. Maybe if you want to think about this way, I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but just a skeleton. In other words, a whole lot more people like Patty and Doug and others that are absolute experts on customized employment know far more about customized employment than I do. What these scales are about is saying we've looked at what's going on in many states. We've got collected data from 9 states. We've collected talked with job developers, did focus groups, did interviews, did many things across many states over the last 3 years, 4 years now, in the development of these scales. And here is the information of what it looks like. We published an article on the consensus of experts that was well received. We have 3 more articles that we have been accepted for publication that'll be out in the next 3 to 4 months. So the good news is, I can say to you now, the good news is what we thought was going to turn out like I thought it did, pretty well did. We found out that 12 of the 15 discovery tenets have held up now across states, across almost 200 people, finding out what's happened with people. So the good news is that we have some real publishable evidence, or you will have in your hands within, let's say, within 6 months, real publishable evidence about why we're doing things this way.
And for those of you who may not know, the first 2 of the fidelity scales are available on the Griffin-Hammis website. And the third scale that Steve mentioned about the customized employment supports and training is not yet available.
And if sometimes it's asked, am I authorized to use the scale? No. You're not authorized to use the scale unless you have training and background and support or customized employment, and many people will say yes, but also that you've learned how to be a discovery fidelity scale or a customized job fidelity scale, other than now a consultative employment training support fidelity scale administrator. So there's folks, and usually that's VR counselors and the people who are in supervisory roles in making funding and management decisions in provider agencies. And there's some other folks too that have a couple VR directors in the United States are also fidelity scale administrators. So
let's talk just a little bit, again, briefly, chiming in onto what Steve already mentioned about what is fidelity. And just that the idea behind the fidelity practices that we have is that there's evidence that the actions taken are reliable and valid, that's based on research, right? It's going to be based on research and data. And I think we've all heard the word fidelity. And as a matter of fact, I think it's been used a lot in our field since the use of that IPS fidelity scale. And I think that fidelity is a term that really has some research behind it, and it isn't just what we think we've been trained to do. So many of us, I think, misuse that term, or we have seen that misused, but realize that it's not just because you've been trained that you necessarily go right off and deliver a service, in particular customized employment service with fidelity. The idea behind the fidelity tools is to help take a look at the evidence behind what you're doing and that you're applying it. So it's not just to say we're already doing it. I was trained, I'm already doing customized employment discovery, job development, and job site supports to fidelity. But it's just a tool to help us understand, and fidelity is the way in which we see that we're applying those practices.
Patty, let me just say one more thing about this. This is really critical to understand what Patty was saying, is that, remember, this is not my ideas. This is not Griffin-Hammis's ideas about, oh, they're saying this is how you go about delivering customized employment with fidelity to best practices. No, this is based on the data, based on the research, based on what we found out by going right to the sources of people doing this work, going to national experts, finding out what they thought, taking our best shot at what we thought the tenets were based on what they told us, and then taking additional data. We're still taking data, continuously taking data and looking at that information, and that, again, not just any data. It's approved by a university internal review board process. So it's an approved process for taking that data, where I don't touch the data, or any of us who have a strong interest in its success don't touch the data, but it goes directly from the practitioner right to the university for analysis. So know that that the process is ongoing. The term for this was called Bayesian or Bayesian. I don't know how to pronounce it right. Thomas Bayes, basically, research which says that things are improved as you're doing research. You make changes. So when Patty mentioned the Discovery Fidelity Scale, if you look on there now, you'll see a version of that. But if you get on there about June, you'll see a new version of the Discovery Fidelity Scale based on our research. And by the way, that'll be the 5th version. And you'll see a third version of the Job Development Fidelity Scale, and you'll see the Consultative Employment Training and Supports Fidelity Scale.
Steve, this next slide, I think, is when you're going to describe what our Fidelity Scale does.
So what the scale is doing is it's saying to what degree or extent do what's going on, that is the policies or systems what's going on with those. So each tenant has a policy, a systems piece, which includes policies, financing, access of different, systems types of questions. And about 2/3 of it is about or more, it's about the services, what actually would be for most familiar. And why we did it that way is because it was just strongly suggested to us, certainly by Gary Bond. I've known him for 30 years. He said, Steve, if you're doing fidelity scale, I strongly recommend that you be sure to have a powerful systems component, because some of our research found that even if people did things in the very best way they were to in the system, in the services part, that if the system did not support that, did not give adequate funding, did not interact with other variables, other systems, sometimes government systems, if you will, work against each other. But all of that needs to, a part of it. So anyway, that's again, there's systems components there. So what it's saying is to agree with it. This is not an evaluation or an assessment. Remember, this is, again, nothing about discovery or customized deployment is evaluative or assessing, and neither is the scale. What this is a determination to help folks then know, oh, okay, now I see, I think I can change that. I can make it better. My biggest surprise in implementing this now over 4 years is of these scales, starting, of course, with the Discovery Fidelity Scale, is that although I'd worked my entire life, helping citizens with disabilities and working with people who do that work, I could not believe how quickly people were learning how to do things differently and made changes. Not just learned, but made actual changes. And I don't know why. I don't have the answer to that. But for some reason, somehow with the scale and the tenants and how it works, and that there's some reason that people are saying, oh, okay, I see, I'll just do that a little differently. And boy, that will be with Fidelity the best practices. So.
And I guess that this is the next component to this is really, what is Fidelity thinking? I mean, I think that that idea behind using a scale, really holding true to practices, but what is the thinking part? Steve, would you like to kind of give us a little summation of that?
Well, as I said before, again, with those, it's what I said about those Nobel Prize winners. It just is that be sure you have accurate information. We tend to want to go about doing things quickly without thinking a lot about things we think we pretty well know the answer to. And it's saying, hey, let's check to see where that data and information is. I know one of my daughters, when she was, in college, I made some comment about something, and she says, "Oh no, Dad, that's not true anymore at all. That's back when you were in college. No, that actually has been proven false. And actually, this is what the truth is now." Oh, I didn't know that. I just assumed that if I learned it, 35 years ago, it must be still true, right? No. So they're so big. So what this is really saying, and that's why one of the titles of one of the Nobel Prize winners, the title of his book is Thinking Fast and Slow. That's what the title of the book is. Just trying to say, hey, look just find out the evidence. Why are we doing this? Well, it's because we're supposed to. It's because what the state pays for. It's because of this is what we've always done, or this is the latest new thing that somebody said that was a great idea. They said it's customized employment. We should do it. Well, we're saying now it's customized employment, and we have the proof. We have the evidence that say when you do customized employment, by the way, be sure you do things that at least have these tenants as a part of it. And there's a whole lot more. So the one article in Journal of Vocational Rehabilitation that's out there is consensus among experts, and so that's available. You can see the research there and what that looks like. The article that's coming out shows we have those any of you that are statistical geeks, we have a Cronbach alpha score. I like saying that, Anyway, see some of that classwork, Kate, this stuff. Some of that classwork, does finally pay off. But of with the changes we made of 0.81, and that means that is rock solid. That says that somebody doing this in Rhode Island, who was on the phone with this morning, folks that are doing this in California, South Dakota, Michigan, Virginia, wherever it may be, that we're Iowa, that we're doing this work, that the same person are giving the same answers, that kind of reliability. So we've improved the tenets as it went along. For example, we found out the word neighborhood. It turned out the data said that when you say the word neighborhood, some people think that's 3 houses this way and 3 houses that way. Whereas other people think of a neighborhood as a 10-mile square area, a neighborhood. We changed that to community, which I always, my thinking, well, community is bigger than a neighborhood, right? Most people think that way. No, again, this is why you take data. What turned out, a community, how people conceptualize it, is that, well, that's where I live and where I usually go to get stuff I need, like to the store or the gas station or to, minor shopping or whatever. That's generally what I think of as my community. So anyway, that's generally what people think. Some people I think of it larger than that, but the data is telling us no, it's kind of that. What I was thinking was neighborhood, but it's better. So that's an example of a change. And that's that Bayesian approach to things, making changes as we go. And then omitted. We found out, though, on the Discovery Fidelity Scale, that one thing about using a conversational style, Carrie Griffin was just, beating it in our heads that you need to be smooth listening, shut up, and listen to what is being said when you're at a home visit at the beginning of Discovery. Take in that information, and then you may ask things that might further extend that conversation, but don't start, here's this question, I got this, and what about this, and what about this, and what do you like, and where do you go? And no, we want to get rid of those questions, but how we went about describing that by saying a conversational approach just didn't have the richness or the exact detail that Carrie's smooth listening did. So that's again, so that tenet has been removed, and we'll move that part of the learning into our training and teaching, with this. So I think that's all I got to say on this. Yeah.
So I think that what Steve's saying about the research behind the fidelity tools, is that it's not just based on Griffin-Hammis's model or Mark Gold Associates model of customized employment, but based on the research of not only the expert opinions of people who are teachers and practitioners, but also people who apply the services, who deliver them on a daily basis, with the outcomes that show that the practices or the tenets that are proposed are reliable and valid. So as a trainer, I teach customized employment. I find that that I'm not teaching to the test. I'm not teaching to fidelity in terms of looking at this tool, but I am teaching customized employment practices. And that this tool, these 3 tools that we have, are not an evaluation or a grade book or a measure of whether you're doing this well, but as a guide to help improve the quality. And the more you do towards the fidelity, the highest fidelity of scoring, helps ensure that you're going to be moving forward to getting positive and effective outcomes of customized employment. So I think that this is, the important part about the thinking part that I described as early on when we talked about what we're going to talk about today. So that's the quick version of the thinking part. And now what I'd like to do is to really talk a bit about the beginning of the 3 tools. And this is the actual doing part. So the Discovery Fidelity Scale was introduced in 2018. It contains 15 different best practice tenets of customized employment discovery. And these include things like the home and community, including, home visits, getting to know the community, maybe not just the neighborhood, but community, really looking at what do you do alongside the job seeker, with the job seeker, to explore and get to know that person. through being active with the individual, not just sitting and having a conversation or just asking questions about what work do you want to do, but really spending time with the person who is seeking employment to uncover their interest in capacities and the tasks and skills that they enjoy doing and what they do in their own home, in their own communities. Another piece of that is doing what we call an informational interview, which is not only getting to know the job seeker in discovery, but also getting to know the community and other people who share similar interests in vocational themes, similar patterns in their lives, to go out and talk to those people in the community in the context of getting to know the job seeker in their community through those interviews. And we really feel that those are really an important part of customized employment and the discovery piece of setting the stage for job development. There's a piece of writing and narrative that's including in the process of telling the person's story, answering that question, who is this person, and writing that in a respectful way that tells the person's story and not in an evaluative way. And then the final part of what's included in discovery is the actual employment planning. Obviously, discovery is different from the traditional evaluation or assessment. And so the fidelity scale allows those tenets to be discussed and to be reviewed to ensure that you are providing those practices, the actions that take place in completing discovery that really match and include, not necessarily match, but you're actually assessing that opportunity for people to get access to these things, to these kinds of practices and tools. So Steve, we want to add anything to that?
Well, no, just that the current scale that's available is the 2018 version. The first scale is actually in 2016, but so it's been a little longer. Yeah.
So I think that just one last thing is just to remember that that as we're moving through customized employment, that discovery is the foundation, and the whole purpose of it is to help with employment development, finding work that's meaningful to an individual with disability. So what we're learning.
I just would say that just so know this, that folks who decide to become Discovery Fidelity Scale administrators, then also a manual comes along with that. And so the manual, if you combine the number of pages in all three manuals together, you're at about 260 pages. Now, I want to say this: if anybody during this COVID and thing has had some trouble sleeping or whatever, forget taking Ambien. All you got to do is become a DFS administrator or a job development administrator, open up that manual, and I guarantee you about 4 pages into that, you're out like a baby. Okay, so they're users manuals. They're named users manuals on purpose. So when you're actually scoring, you're saying, I don't know if this is a 1 or a 2. Which one should I score this? And you can go there and look at examples, more detail, more information about what is that tenet's about, and you can decide which. Oh, that's a 2 now. Now I see from that manual. So that's what it's for, not to be read cover to cover unless you want to go to sleep. So, Steve, let's talk a little bit about what has happened from the research and what we've been learning. Oh, we're learning. Okay. Okay. Who's eligible? All right. Here's what we know, but most people don't know this. Who is eligible according to RSA? It'd be a good idea to see, well, what does the rehab administration think? Or how about somebody named CMS? How about CMS, the Center for Medicare Services? What are they? Medicare and Medicaid Services? What do they think? What does it actually say? Because we sometimes think, and what we found in the research, that widespread, this is for people who have the most significant disabilities among those who already have the most significant disabilities. Or as one VR director said, this is her words, I'll be damned if we're going to run customized employment just for the most severe of the most severe. finally we have something that really works for people, that really gets them good jobs that last, and we're not going to just limit it to this tiny group. So what this is for, and yes, it was sold from the beginning about this will work for people who you say you've tried support employment, you've tried other ways of doing things, that yes, well then how about giving us a shot with customized employment? Yes, I understand that, and understand all that. Same things were said, by the way, about supported employment at the beginning. So who RSA says is eligible says this: if you're eligible for supported employment, you're eligible for customized employment. So that's what the law says. So that's who is eligible. Now, who's getting it? See, we got data now, right? Here's who's getting it. You are more likely to be in customized employment, receiving customized employment in the United States if you are white, if you are under age 40, if you're male, and you do not receive another service through a day activity center or a group home. In other words, if the system already has a way of billing for whatever service they're giving you, it's very unlikely that you're going to be referred for customized employment. It says that if you're a Black female, data across 9 states, the number of Black women in customized employment is 0. If you do not speak English as your primary language, only 2 in the United States. Remember, the very first place that the Discovery Fidelity Scale was introduced was in the most populated county in the United States, in Southern California, where half the people speak, which was where the 2 people are from, where half the people speak a language other than English as their primary language. So when we talk about access, and it says financing is insufficient, just know that even to get in the door, all the issues that our society is going through right now with racism and white supremacy and all that, remember, it overlays everything we're talking about. So this, and I say that to folks so they will become aware that, wow, when our state and when we go about doing this, let's make extraordinarily certain that the people that are getting these services look like the rest of America and not like just a few of us. Access is denied when financing is insufficient. You know, we had a state that said, you know, you can do this. We got all kinds of different ways to do discovery. We can just do it anyway. You know, whatever we can do. I will not tell you the name of the state. We will do Discovery Light. We'll do Discovery Amber. We'll do Discovery Porter, or we'll do Discovery Stout, named after different kinds of beer. This was sent out by government officials all across the state. Now, nobody got fired. People got in a little bit of trouble, but know that some people were getting $400 worth of discovery. Oh, well, that's what you could just do. All they could afford was Discovery Light, so that's what we gave them. You know, so just know that when the financing is insufficient, then not just discovery doesn't work, but customized employment doesn't work. In other words, it is important. I always say the best boss I ever had, Janie Miller, said to me when I was a state commissioner, said to me, Steve, remember, it's not about the money unless it's about the money, and it's always about the money. So that's what point 2 is about access. And then in the authorizations of customized employment, you're authorizing customized employment. There have been people thinking that, well, discovery, that's just discovery with support employment tacked on the back end of it. It's not at all. So remember, the referrals need to be that we're authorizing customized employment, of course, beginning with discovery and then moving on to customized job development. So that's some of the data we're learning. Let's see what else I have here. But I think that's all I have.
The next slide, we need to move a little more quickly because we've got a lot more to cover.
Okay.
So the next slide we're talking about is the additional kind of points that we have around discovery activities and what we've learned, I think, a lot from this research is that it's important. What we're learning is how the job seeker learns best and how they're best supported. It's not so much can he do this job from what we might do in more traditional assessments. The research is really supporting that it's a process of being with people intentionally to learn about how we might best support them and how they can learn, because people can learn new jobs, right? And they can learn something that they don't already know how to do. Otherwise, people would just be placed in jobs very boring and just doing the same thing. So that's one thing we're learning.
Let me interrupt. I just want to emphasize that point is that nobody on this screen that has a good job knew how to do that job before you got it. There's no such thing as a good job that you already know how to do before you get it. Yet look at what we've been doing with people with disabilities. Oh, let's assess them and evaluate. Let's be sure you got those skills. And now we know what you can do, which is usually glorified chores, right? Like all of us without anything else, that's what we know how to do. Then what ends up happening, we place them in jobs doing that endlessly. I mean, what a nightmare is that you mean, this is what I know how to do. And the job, you basically aren't going to teach me anything. And so that's what we've been doing with people with disabilities. Nothing that we would ever accept for ourselves. We would not accept that, because we only take jobs where we're going to have a chance to grow, chance to learn, chance to have influence and to help others.
So the other parts we're learning about the informational interviews is just how important that has been to expanding opportunities in someone's community, in being able to understand that we're not there to seek employment. We're not there under discovery. The research is helping us understand that the value of those informational interviews creates more opportunities for the job seeker, and certainly for those of us who are helping and supporting someone to go beyond what we already know. And then
let me interrupt. I'm sorry there. I have to do this because informational interviews is my very, very, very favorite part of discovery and of customized employment. Informational interviews. Listen to this. This is something that was created by Kerry Griffin. He said, how about this as an idea? Rather than going out in the community and just seeing who has jobs and who might hire people with disabilities, why don't we go places where everybody working there, or almost everybody, has the exact same, at least emerging vocational themes as the employment seeker. I mean, imagine you're a VR counselor. You've been trained to be a VR counselor. Well, I think I'm just going to wander around and see what jobs are open and see who might want to hire me. No, you're going to go where other people already have your vocational theme, vocational rehabilitation, if you're going to be a VR counselor. Same thing for people with disabilities. And what informational interviews does, it's a first step among many, as you'll see, and certainly in customized job development, that drives you right towards places where all the information is, where people who know what your vocational theme is, what vocational interests you have, and have lots of information about that you could never imagine otherwise.
So, Steve, we do need to cover this more quickly. And for those of you who don't know, Steve is my husband. And so I'm going to move him along a little more quickly, as only a wife can. Quit talking so much and let's move through this, because we've got only about 20 minutes left before we do the Q&A. So we've got a lot more to cover. So,
Doug, you need to be a moderator here, Doug. Remember, this is what you need to moderate.
Yeah, Doug, you need to get in between us here. And so then the last piece in discovery, what we're learning, I'm going to move as quickly, is what I think is the beauty of this is lists of businesses that come from this process. It's actually in discovery that the employment plan is developed. And I think that's one of the beauties of customized employment and the process of discovery is it's the bridge to job development, and it really sets the stage. It doesn't do an assessment and hand it off to someone else. I just think it's just a fabulous way. So the next part, the other scale that we have is the customized employment job development scale. And that this is the second of the three fidelity scales that we have. This one, I've got to move my chat box off my screen, is that it has 13 tenets, 13 fidelity best practice tenets. And included in those are things around the CE job developer, in an employment seeker planning process of really getting to know the financials, the individual's support needs. What do they want out of employment in terms of financials, remuneration, how it impacts their benefits, those kinds of things. Using that informational interview approach to engaging employers. We just discussed that in Discovery. We talked about how we use that, and that a customized job development approach is different from a more traditional or conventional approach. And those tenets will reflect that in that job development scale. Looking at a job analysis as part of the customized job development process is to analyze work tasks, training, supports, in order for you to negotiate, in order for the representative, the job developer, whatever you may call yourself at your agency, on behalf of and with the employment seeker to negotiate a job. And that really ends up with a proposal, a negotiated proposal or training and a training plan that bridges to the next phase. So those are the components that you'll see in those 13 fidelity best practice tenets in the job development fidelity scale.
Let me give just two things about that. Negotiated, Patty mentioned negotiated employment proposal. As Carrie Griffin, again, has always said, if it's not negotiated, it's not customized. Well, you can't go out to a business and just tell them what parts of the job you want to do and that. Here's what we found out. Remember, this is research. What we found out, what employers say, when I go and hire somebody, when I ask them, hey, can you do this? Yeah. Can you do this? Yeah. Hey, how about this? Can you do this? Yeah. How about flying to the moon? Yeah, I can do that. In other words, they say yes, yes, yes to everything I ask them. And then when they actually start the job, it's like they can't do it yes, yes, yes to everything, right? Finally, here's what I'm put business say. Finally, somebody's telling me the truth. This is what is a part of the job that is not likely going to be in this person's wheelhouse, is going to work out so well, and this isn't. Well, then it's okay. You're telling me that up front. Then I know that I can then modify or change the job. So negotiate it. Everything is negotiated all the way through. And just, well, anyway, that's enough on that. Yeah.
That's enough, Steve. Okay, let's move on. So we have some ideas and some thoughts, 8 points to share. So let's be brief, Mr. Hall. These are what we're learning about customized job development, what we're learning from the research through the fidelity scales. The number one thing is that customized job development is not job finding. And often what we have found in previous practices or more conventional practices is that we go find those open jobs. The data is sharing clearly that when practiced with fidelity, that it is actually developing employment.
I'm sorry, Patty. A supervisor of the most populated county in the United States, in Southern California, more people live there than 9 states combined. If you think you got a tough job, be a supervisor for that county. She said, when she became a DFS administrator, she said, you know what? And then she became a job development fidelity scale administrator. She said, for years, we've been calling this job development. We've never done job development. What we've been doing is job finding. We have been using the taxpayer dollars and paying for a job finding service. Go out there and find a job. In fact, what they've been doing is before they even know the person with disabilities, the job developer, because of the demand for finding jobs, they go out there and meet businesses and find places for people to work before they've ever met them. So it's zero. It's not nothing about it's customized. Can you imagine somebody already has your job before they ever meet you? Decide. So that's that part.
Okay. I think another piece that we're learning is about that the Discovery Employment Plan that was developed at the first part of customized employment and Discovery actually guides the job development. And maybe in other processes we have seen where people have completed an assessment and then the job developer goes off and does what they plan to do or what they traditionally do. We're really seeing that with those tenets that from the research, it says that when we follow that plan guide that we get best outcomes. We also know that the CE job developer is not just a person who goes out and finds a job and hands it off. We find the research is showing us that when that job developer support, could be the employment specialist, employment consultant, whatever the title might be, really ensures some relationships are built between the employment seeker and the community and business members. It's really a process of kind of bridging a connection to other people who share similar interests and similar themes. That practice comes to hold true when we find that data and that research to support that. And then lastly, for at least on this slide, we have a few more. We have a few more, Steve.
Okay, I know. But want me to cover the transportation?
Yeah.
So on transportation, we're going to publish. We already have published consensus among experts on our data for why the tenets are for discovery. We've been accepted for publication of a similar article for the tenets for customized job development. And so what we do is what folks are saying is a consensus among, dozens and dozens and dozens of experts. That's generally a tenet, except for this one, tenet 1.5 in the Job Development Fidelity Scale. The experts said, no, transportation is not important. It should not be one of the tenets. That the decision was made by Beth Keaton, the executive director of Griffin-Hammis Associates, and myself together to keep this tenet in there. Now, here we are. We're saying we're doing this based on research and data. And on this, we're making one exception. And right here it is. Because in transportation, here's what we know. That if you want to be in a day center, you want to be in a group home, you would come from your parents' house to the day center and back, the government will pay, Medicaid will just fine, will pay you to your door, back and forth transportation at no cost to you for the rest of your life. At a cost, depending on the state, of between $8,000 and $14,000 a year. We're going to do that. But you say, oh no, I think what I'd rather be is spend my life alongside other citizens, all of which don't have significant disabilities, and I'd also like to work. In other words, I would like my psychosocial habilitation and rehabilitation plan to not be only with other people with disabilities in a facility, but instead I want to be in the context of real life in the community. Oh, by the way, no transportation then. Zero funding. Okay. Now people on VR will say, no, that's not quite right, Steve, because VR will pay for funding. Yes, that's true. Some states, maybe many states, will pay for funding, but time limited. After the VR closure and after that time, then VR does not continue to provide that funding. So obviously what that is saying right there is trying to get at a policy shift, a policy change that says you need to make the money so that it does follow the person when it comes to transportation. The transportation money needs to follow the person because of lack of transportation, by simply saying, well, if you're going to get employed, that means your dad needs to take you. Well, my dad's 75 years old. Well, whatever you need to do there. And that, as you can see, the data is showing that's an impediment to employment. Successful. Yeah.
There's a few more points, and Steve, I'll go through these quickly because we want to get to the final tool.
Okay.
So what we're also learning and through the research is that financial plan that's developed early on in discovery is an important and critical point to the job development. It helps not only for the job seeker to understand and for the employment specialist or job developer to understand what kind of work and what kind of income is important, but it also helps with planning for unique outcomes of customized employment, including self-employment, resource ownership. We know that the informational interview approach is a better approach than a more conventional job development marketing approach. We know that in customized job development, the essential component, as Steve described earlier, is the negotiation. If negotiation occurs, there's an opportunity to really cement what works best for people. I think that negotiation piece is critical, and that data supports that. And that the one piece that's really unique to this is that employment, the training plan, the idea of who's going to help train and support doesn't occur by a handoff to a job coach, but that the job developer who is representing the employment seeker is really playing a critical role in developing that as part of that negotiation. And so that's a really an important and critical piece to this job development fidelity. So last but not least is the third tool, which is it's 2021. And this is the Consultative Employment Training and Supports Fidelity Scale. I never can say the initials. It drives me crazy. CETF, I don't know how many letters there are. But this, now the third and final fidelity scale, is a really an important piece to maybe a different approach to how we see job site supports. For so often we have seen employment specialists or job coaches come in and assume responsibility from day one. And we know, and we have known for many years, that a consultative approach benefits not only the new employee by not being ostracized by having this job coach attached to the shoulder, but it also really assumes that there's some that the coworkers are better trainers. The typical trainer of an organization is a better trainer than we could possibly ever be. So there are 14 tenets to this fidelity scale. And that a few of these tenets on the page are the customary and ordinary coworker training, not assuming or stepping in to be the buffer between typical coworkers and supervisors and trainers, using the natural ways in which typically people are trained at a job site and supported.
And that particular, and at that particular jobs, how people are, so it'd be different for every place, but it's how their people are usually trained and supported there. That's it.
Exactly. Providing some direct consultative training, and that doesn't necessarily mean to the new employee. We're talking about providing that consultative training and support to the typical coworkers and supervisors and natural trainers.
But it also can be. It also can be, including systematic instruction. And it's like, well, wait a minute, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. Now, is this I thought we were doing customized employment, and I thought this was all about that the coworker does all the training. Not so fast. Sometimes there will be some things and some processes involved where the actual person that's doing the consultative training will actually do with systematic instruction. And it'll look a lot like job coaching for some pieces. So it isn't all baby or throwing out the baby with the bathwater. There's some excellent reasons why some critical times and critical pieces where that person can step in. But as Patty said, if at all possible, of course, what we're talking about is at the same time along with the coworker who is primarily responsible for training.
And so all of, as you can see, not all of the 14 tenets are reflected on this page. There's much more detail in that document, but really understanding the specific differences, I think, in a consultative employment training and supports practice certainly talks a lot more about the consultation, understanding and really ensuring a good quality of a work culture and relationships with coworkers. It also includes negotiating reasonable accommodations. It's not just simply that process of assuming it will happen, but playing an active role, and really ensuring that there's some type of ongoing support strategy that is very, very necessary to ensuring that people maintain their employment. So those practices, you'll find those tenets, those best practice tenets will be in that consultative employment training and supports fidelity scale, where you can see the full length of those 14 tenets. And what we're learning from the research at this point is really, really a powerful piece, is that the coworker, supervisor, whoever that might be, who is an employee, is responsible for the training as much as we can. And as Steve said, we certainly do step in or do assure that would happen, but we want to make sure that that the coworker is always the first and foremost responsible for training. That it is really important really to make sure that that the individuals have good skills in understanding how to be a consultant and how to provide that work culture training, whether it's to the coworkers or to the new employee.
And by the way, it turns out that skills and work culture are equally important. this is a big one. The coworker can be compensated for their work. So again, this is different now, but we never done that before. Never done it before. Vocational rehabilitation authorizes millions of dollars every day to do exactly this. So this is nothing unusual. It just is, for some reason, it's not been a part of what we've done with integrated community employment of any kind. So now what we find out with customized employment, yes, the coworker can be compensated, again, extraordinarily compensated, again, for that training and teaching. Again, could open up a lot of people, employers that may make it more interested. And then the last thing I want to say on 4 is we found out that it really matters with non-work, the integrated, in other words, it turns out that it does matter where they are where people are when they're not working. And if they're, again, congregated, segregated, isolated, only with other people with disabilities, even though that some people may want to be there and some of their family members may want to be there, what we found is it has again, the data, it has a negative effect on the outcomes of that. And maybe is the reason why we're seeing hours from when people begin employment, we see it going backwards, not forwards. Okay, last thing, review.
Well, there's a couple pages. There's 2 more slides, Steve. But
okay,
I think
here we go.
The kind of review of overall what we've talked about.
Okay, so I'll say this, and Patty, and then you add to whatever needs to be. Okay, nobody has ever been employed at a good job where they already had the skills to do the job before they employed, right? Patty, something to add about that?
No, I think you said that just fine.
The discovery, I said it 4 times. The discovery process, it drives towards uncertainty. And we're so used to it, we want things certain. We even make up ideas when we don't know something. We make, maybe this is the answer. Guy down the street says, I think you're onto something there. Next thing, I got 2 people agree with me. It must be the truth. And this is saying drives towards uncertainty. In other words, possibilities. You don't know until you go out there in the informational interviews with Discovery and using an informational interview approach with customized job development. You don't know what all the possibilities for jobs are. Again, the job finding we talked about the first time that we're purchasing and getting paid to actually develop jobs. This second to the last bullet, psychosocial habilitation and rehabilitation continues. And what that means is this. People say, just what's the cost benefit of doing this kind of thing? Let me just tell you what the enormous cost benefit is. Did you know that psychosocial habilitation and rehabilitation continues after the person has the case is, if you will, closed by BR, is case closure status 26 or whatever the code is today, and there's no more funding going on except for maybe an occasional check-in to make sure things are going well and that sort of thing. In other words, minimal expenditure of taxpayer dollars. That psychosocial habilitation and rehabilitation continues even when there's not a paid human service worker around. That is what the definition of a psychosocial habilitation and rehabilitation process is. It takes place in the context of real life, and in real life, everybody isn't always paid to be around you. There's what the giant difference is. In other words, and what's the cost to taxpayers? 0 or nearly 0. So there you have it. When you talk about cost benefit, gigantic benefits on the backside. Obviously, for the citizen now is a part of a life and money and everything that involved in all that, but also for the taxpayers. And then I just want to emphasize this is this is a killer. And this is every one of us on this screen. If you're successful in your job, here's what you had. You had at least one coworker. Hopefully it was a supervisor, but if not, somebody else that believes in you. That's how we succeed in life. You have one person that believes in you. All you need on a job is one person that believes in you, and that turns out to be huge in consultative employment training and supports. So there's different ways to say this. Now, what Patty would not let me put on here is that we've got our data. Where's yours? We got our data on what we think you should do with taxpayer dollars and customize and invest in customized in these citizens through customized employment. We'd like to see what your data says about the effectiveness of some of the other ways you might go about this. We think that financing of all vocational services and supports should be based on fidelity to best practices. That is based on real research and data, and not on if you will, customary and ordinary practice. So.